In 1978, a young man from Bensonhurst named Nicholas Skybetta disappeared. He was in his 20s. Everyone called him Little Nicky. He was the only brother of a woman named Deborah, and by every account they were close, in the way that families in that neighborhood were close. The same streets, the same church, the same handful of blocks their parents had emigrated into. He was never found alive. What was eventually recovered, according to the accounts that survive, was an arm. That is what his sister was left with. Not a body, not a funeral in any complete sense. An arm. Deborah Skybetta had been married for 7 years by then, to a man from the same neighborhood. A short, powerfully built man who worked in construction and had been in and out of trouble since he was a teenager. His name was Salvatore Gravano. The world would come to know him as Sammy the Bull. And years later, when he sat down with federal prosecutors and began confessing to the murders he had taken part in, 19 of them, by his own admission, more than any other government witness in the history of the American mafia. One of the names on that list was Nicholas Skybetta, his wife's only brother. Now here is the part that makes this a story, rather than just an atrocity. Deborah Gravano did not leave in 1978. She did not leave in 1985 or 1990. She stayed married to him for 18 more years, and when she finally did divorce him in 1996, after he had already destroyed the Gambino crime family from the witness stand and vanished into federal protection, she did not run. She moved to Arizona. She bought a house 9 miles from his apartment. And within a few years, she and both of their children were arrested alongside him for running one of the largest ecstasy operations in the American Southwest. This is what happened inside Sammy the Bull's marriage, and it is nastier than you think. Start with who they were before any of it. Salvatore Gravano was born in Brooklyn in 1945, the youngest child and only son of Sicilian immigrants. His father ran a small dress factory. He was dyslexic in an era that had no word for it, struggled badly in school, and was held back, which is where the nickname came from, because when other boys tried to take a bicycle off him, he fought all of them. And a neighborhood man said the kid was like a little bull. He left school, joined a street gang, did 2 years in the army, came home, and moved steadily up through the ranks of organized crime in Brooklyn. Construction was the front. Marathon Concrete, and later other companies. The business underneath was what everybody in that world did. Extortion, gambling, and violence. Deborah Skybetta grew up in the same place, one of 3 children of first-generation immigrants in Bensonhurst. They married in 1971. They had 2 children, a daughter, Karen, a son, Gerard. And by every outward measure, for the first stretch of it, this was an ordinary Brooklyn marriage in an extraordinary business. He went out. She kept the house. There was money. And the money got better as he rose, and nobody at home asked where it came from, because that is not what you did. 7 years in, her brother disappeared. What is documented is this: Nicholas Skybetta was killed in 1978. Only part of his remains was ever recovered. And decades later, when Salvatore Gravano became a cooperating witness and detailed his role in 19 murders, his brother-in-law was among them. What is not documented, what nobody outside that house can tell you, is what Deborah knew and when. There is no interview. There is no book. She has never publicly discussed it in any detail. So the honest position is that we know the murder happened. We know her husband confessed to a role in it, and we do not know what she understood in 1978, in 1980, or in 1990. What we do know is that the marriage continued. Think about what that means in practice, whichever version is true. If she did not know, then she spent 18 years grieving a brother across the dinner table from the man responsible, and eventually found out. And by then, she had 2 teenage children and a life built entirely inside that world. If she did know, or came to suspect, then she made a decision that most people cannot imagine making, and then got up the next morning and made it again for 18 years. There is no version of this that is not terrible. In 1991, the marriage ran into the thing that ended it, and it was not the murder. Salvatore Gravano was underboss of the Gambino crime family, the second most powerful man in the most powerful criminal organization in the United States, directly beneath John Gotti. And the FBI had Gotti on tape at the Ravenite Social Club, talking at length about the men underneath him, including Gravano. Gravano heard those recordings and made a calculation. He went to the government. In 1992, he testified against John Gotti and put him in prison for the rest of his life. He went on to testify in case after case, and by the end, he had been instrumental in convicting dozens of men across the American mafia. For 19 admitted murders, he served 5 years. He came out in 1995 and went into the Federal Witness Protection Program with a new name in a new state. And in 1996, Deborah filed for divorce. That is the moment, and it is worth being precise about it. Not the brother, not the murders, not the 20 years of what he actually did for a living. She filed after he became an informant. Now, people have offered all sorts of explanations for that, and most of them are guesswork. The one thing that can be said with confidence is what it looks like from the outside. A marriage survived the disappearance of her only brother. It did not survive him breaking the code. And then comes the part that nobody can explain, and that turns this from a bad marriage into something genuinely strange. She followed him. Deborah Gravano moved to Arizona. She bought a house measuring 4,400 square feet in Tempe, with a swimming pool and a 3-car garage about 9 miles from the apartment where her ex-husband was living. Their daughter Karen moved with her. Their son Gerard bought a house in Tempe too. Sammy Gravano kept a separate apartment where he slept at night. The reported reason was to protect the family, so that if anyone from New York ever came looking, they would not find them in the same building. He had, by this point, put more members of the American mafia in prison than any man alive. There were a great many people who wanted him dead, and his ex-wife and both his children voluntarily relocated to the same suburb. The family also went into business. Deborah opened an Italian restaurant in Scottsdale, Uncle Sal's. Sammy started a construction company and called it Marathon, which was the same name he had used in Brooklyn. Sit with that detail for a second because it tells you something about the man that no psychological analysis could improve on. He is in witness protection. He has a new identity, and he names his new company after his old one. The children worked in the family businesses. Karen's fiance, David Seabrook, lived with her and their baby at Deborah's house. By the late 1990s, the entire family was in one Arizona suburb, running restaurants and construction and a pool company, with a father who had killed 19 people and testified against all of them. It did not last. In 1999, law enforcement first heard about a drug ring operating out of Arizona. The product was ecstasy. Investigators would later allege that the organization was distributing up to 30,000 pills a week, moving product from Arizona to New York, and that Salvatore Gravano was its boss and its bankroller. In February of 2000, they came for everyone. 48 defendants were eventually indicted in connection with the ring. Most of them were Arizona residents. Among them were Salvatore Gravano, his ex-wife Deborah, his son Gerard, his daughter Karen, and Karen's fiance. The whole family. The state seized what they had: the house in Tempe, Uncle Sal's Ristorante, Marathon Construction, $93,000 in cash, and $25,000 in bank accounts, a cache of weapons, a blue bulletproof vest, pinky rings, and gold chains. And in 2001, they all pleaded guilty. Salvatore Gravano pleaded to 10 counts in Arizona, including conspiracy to sell dangerous drugs, participating in a criminal syndicate, money laundering, and weapons misconduct. He had already pleaded guilty to federal conspiracy charges in New York the previous month. Gerard Gravano, 24 years old, pleaded guilty to illegally conducting an enterprise and to offering to sell and transport dangerous drugs. He was sentenced to more than 9 years. Karen Gravano, 29, pleaded guilty to the use of wire or electronic communications in drug-related transactions. She received supervised probation. And Deborah Gravano, 48 years old, pleaded guilty to illegally conducting an enterprise. She received probation. Now put the whole shape of it together, because this is the thing that makes this marriage different from every other one on this channel. Every other mob wife we have covered was outside the business. Nina Castellano ran a house and did not ask questions. Karen Hill was pulled into it and eventually pulled out by federal agents. May Capone spent 40 years defending a man from the outside. Deborah Gravano was a co-defendant. She stood in a Maricopa County courtroom and pleaded guilty in the same case as her ex-husband, her son, and her daughter. 2 years later, in November of 2003, the Attorney General of Arizona ordered Deborah and Salvatore Gravano to pay $805,713.41 to the state as reimbursement for the cost of investigating and prosecuting their drug ring. A joint judgment against a divorced couple. For a business they ran together after the divorce, that is the strangest legal document in this entire story. They had been divorced for 7 years. And the state of Arizona still had to name them together because that is how the enterprise had operated. Salvatore Gravano went back to prison and served until September of 2017. He will be on federal parole for the rest of his life. Since his release, he has become, of all things, a media personality. He hosts a podcast, he gives interviews. He runs a channel with hundreds of thousands of subscribers where he talks about the life, the murders, the code, and the family. His son Gerard served his sentence, came out, and by the accounts available, has built a legitimate life, married, with children, and on good terms with his father. His daughter Karen went on to write a book and to appear on television, and she has spoken publicly about all of it for years. Deborah did not. She served her probation, and she went quiet, and she has stayed quiet ever since. No book, no podcast, no interviews of substance. The most she seems to have wanted from any of this was to be left alone with what remained of her family. So, was the marriage nastier than you think? Here is the arithmetic. She married him in 1971. 7 years later, her only brother disappeared, and the only part of him ever recovered was an arm. And decades afterward, her husband would confess to a role in his death. She stayed for 18 more years. She left in 1996, not over the brother, and not over the 19 murders, but after he became a government witness. She then moved to the same desert suburb he had been relocated to, bought a house 9 miles from his, opened a restaurant, and within a few years was standing in a courtroom pleading guilty in a drug conspiracy alongside her ex-husband and both of her children. And in 2003, a state attorney general ordered the two of them, jointly, to repay $800,000. There is a version of the mob wife that films have taught us, the woman at the kitchen table who does not ask, who is protected from the business by a wall of silence, who suffers because of what her husband does, but is never part of it. That is not this. What actually happened here is that a family that had already survived a murder inside itself was given by the federal government the rarest thing anyone in that world ever gets. New names, a new state, a clean start, paid for by the taxpayer, in a suburb where nobody knew who they were. And they rebuilt the exact same thing. Same company name, same structure, same father at the top, same children working underneath him, same money. The Witness Protection Program could take them out of Brooklyn. It could not take Brooklyn out of the marriage.